It's okay. It's cool. Hey everyone, we're going to start the program. There will be people coming in, or perhaps people just RSVP and don't show up. So it's hard to tell sometimes when you do events. So it's funny when we do events, we say, oh, okay, 30% fallout rate, but sometimes it's more than that, and so it's hard to calculate. So, but hopefully there'll be more people coming because we have a good program tonight, and we want everyone to learn from the speakers, and you will have an opportunity after the panel discussion to ask questions. So you see the speaker, there's like microphones on the side, on the aisles. So after, you will get a chance. So what we want is that, they'll speak and then there'll be a formal Q&A period. Not that we're formal, we're not very formal. However, we will have a formal Q&A period. So, this is one of the many events that Asian Women in Business does. There are some members, Shiny, and I see other people who are members. And so in 2 weeks, we do an event on Asian women who are leading legal departments in corporate America. So we like to feature Asian women as the best they are, in which they are. So we want people to see it that way. And we also give, in between, different networking events. So some people here also know we go to the Metropolitan Museum. We go to only low-level places like the Met, and we have receptions there. So we had a great Lunar New Year, Women's History Month. So we think of, having forums like this and having good networking opportunities that where you learn art. Because the way I look at it, when you network, you're more interesting if you know about art, right? You have more to talk about. So art is very much a part of your whole professional life, and it should be your professional life, because it makes you more interesting, makes you more exciting, and being creative, even though you're not creative, I'm not creative, by the way, but watching other creative people or watching what they produce is just exhilarating. Yeah, so we offer those kinds of opportunities for our members. So if you want to support us, there's some membership information that we have. You could talk to some of our members. Annabelle will talk to you, that what the privileges are in joining us as a member. Okay. So today we're really happy to have a group of startups. We did this 2 years ago. We did 20-something CEOs. They all sort of went out of business, So we took people a little bit older. They don't have to be 22 years old or 23 years old. So not that they're old, right? But they're not like 22 or 23. So they are going to be sustainable. They're going to last forever and have huge business, have an IPO and all this stuff. So we picked them based on that premise that they will be, and we hope they will be, really successful and not go out of business after a year like some of the startups that we've met, that are 22 years old. So anyway, we have a great moderator who is in the field. So Angela Lee, who is also the founder and head of 37 Angels, a network that invests in early stage startups and training women to invest in startups. I know I've talked to like Esther about investing in startups, right? We talked about Angel, and what do we do? So anyway, Angela provides a good service for people to do that, and she teaches, she's a leader, and so we're really happy to have Angela moderating our panel. Angela.
Thank you. So, can you guys hear me without the mic? Yes. Okay, awesome. Oh, you need me to use the mic? Okay, happy to do so. So I wanted to start by kind of just having the panelists introduce themselves, both their personal background and also a little bit about what their company does. And so I guess I'll start. My name's Angela Lee. Got a full-time, my role is I teach up at Columbia Business School, and I've started 4 companies, and as Bonnie mentioned, run 37 Angels as well. We invest in early stage startups. Just so you guys get a sense of scope, in a given year, we'll look at 2,000 companies and invest in about 10. And Wendy was actually one of the companies that we invested in 2013. So, you want to introduce yourself?
Hi, my name is Sonpreet Bhatia. I'm one of the co-founders and CTO at MyCityWay. So MyCityWay is a technology company we were founded in 2009 that helps large brands. Our enterprise platform is used by large brands across industries to track their customers and customer journey. Prior to this, I started my career at IBM TJ Watson as a scientist about 13 years ago, 14 years ago. And my last job when I quit was VP at Merrill Lynch. And that's it.
Hi, everyone. My name is Wendy Nguyen. I'm the CEO, co-founder of a startup called HealthyOut. HealthyOut is an online ordering platform for healthy restaurant food. So for all of you guys who use Seamless, I hope to see you on HealthyOut. We've launched here in New York City. In the next few weeks, we'll be rolling out nationwide on our mobile app. And we're also introducing a new product called the 5-Day Detox, and that we're piloting this month. My background. So I started my career at Bain in management consulting, worked in private equity for a few years, and then decided that I much rather work within a team and build a product, although I enjoyed my experience there and have been doing startups for the past 8 years. The last one that I was with was a company called Social Chorus. I was the second employee, helped to build the 40-plus person team, and then decided to venture out and do something on my own. So that's me.
Hi, everyone. My name is Lily Liu. I'm the founder of a company called PublicStuff. So a little background on myself. I actually started in local government, so I studied business and public policy. And then I went on to do a rotational program at the local government level, which really set the stage for where I am today. So in that program, landed me a position to manage a 311 call center. So those of you who live here in New York City, you're probably familiar with that. It's a non-emergency call center. So you dial 311 for things like potholes, broken streetlight, noise complaints, something smells on my block. These are the things you can call into 311, non-life-threatening. Problem was the system cost the city over $15 million, at least the proposals we received. And the city was not in a position where they could actually afford something like that. And so that brought me to start a company called PublicStuff, which is a self-service 311 system online and through mobile applications. So we're in about a couple hundred cities to date, and we've been operating for almost 3 years.
Very cool. So the way this is going to work is I have a couple of planned questions to ask, but I want this to be incredibly interactive. And I actually wanted to start by just getting a sense of who is in the room. So I guess my question is, who here is part of a startup right now? Okay. Who here is fundraising right now? Okay. Who here is kind of before that, maybe just thinking about one day starting a company or maybe one day joining a startup? I feel like those are the same hands. I guess I would love to, in quick, 5-word bursts, just kind of get a sense of, what are the types of questions that people have in the room. So just, very quickly, short bursts. What are the things that are on your mind? Because I want to make sure that we kind of get to them at a holistic level and that we're answering questions that you're interested in. Yes?
Mentorship. My partner and I are starting an app, like a self-improvement app, but neither of us have any technical experience whatsoever.
Okay.
So, or, the whole business side of it, but we're in it.
Okay, so mentorship, specifically getting technical help. What else? Other questions folks have? Yes?
Accessibility to VCs.
So accessibility to VCs, meaning how to raise funding. Okay. Other questions? We can't just have two. Yes.
How to build out your team as
Okay.
well, just outside of you and your co-founders and other needed interns that you hire. How to build out.
Okay. Building out a team. Yes.
How much crowdfunding activity you see, if any?
Okay. Crowdfunding. And let's get one question from this side of the room. Yep. How do you even start? Okay, so I actually would love to start with that question, which is, I love the background that everybody on this panel has, and I would love to just, that first startup, the first time you kind of dove in, what made you feel like you were ready? Maybe we'll start with Lily and come this way.
Sure. So I don't know if I ever really felt completely ready. There wasn't necessarily a moment where I knew, hey, now's the time to go, but it was really taking baby steps, at least for myself. So I'm a first-time entrepreneur. And really what gave me the confidence to do it was understanding the industry that I was creating a solution for. And so coming from local government, I really understood what their needs were. I understood who I would sell into eventually. I understood who the user base was and the politics behind all of it. And so in building up the initial wireframes for what the product would look like and understanding how we would grow and scale and looking at how to recruit talent, it was really always about thinking about our customers and the enterprises that we would be selling into. So for me, it was understanding that gave me a lot of confidence, and then step by step. So, first wireframes and getting really comfortable with what the product would even look like. Then, putting some numbers together to build out a model for what the business would look like. Talking to people, lots of mentorship, lots of brainstorming sessions, late nights. And I was moonlighting a lot of the time. And so, I was doing something else and then doing this at night or on the weekends. So really taking it slowly is my method. I've heard of completely different strategies as well, where people, dive in all at once and they quit their job, they start with their new idea. And so maybe that's the story that we have on this panel, but that's my experience.
So for those of you who are interested in entrepreneurship, I could say that I've always been. I remember kind of working at Bain my first couple years, late nights, sitting with my cube mate, just coming up with ideas at like 10 o'clock at night, just because that's what we did. And so when I decided to do HealthyOut, it was actually born out of that type of process where my startup buddy and I, we got together, we came up with every single possible idea that we had. We would put Post-it notes on a wall, and we spent every single weekend doing this and vetting out different categories, different ideas that compelled us. And it wasn't until we got to an idea that we were just personally excited about that we would go and research and say, I would quit my job and do this. So it really was kind of born out of a rigorous process of saying, I want to start a startup. It's not going to happen naturally. I'm not going to just instantly come up with inspiration for it. I'm going to approach it like the way I would work and would do work and brainstorm and take ideas, vet them, and kind of go forward with them.
Mayor Bloomberg. So my experience in IBM as a scientist was quite amazing because I got to see what I built way after. I would probably, there would be years and years before the product would go live. And from there, I moved to Wall Street, and my last job at Merrill Lynch as a VP, it would take a couple of years before I saw the impact of what I did go live. And it just happened that the financial market was pretty bad in 2009, and mobile had just come out. We built an app in 40 days on weekends and weeknights, and it won multiple awards in the big apps competition. And as a part of that, we got to meet Mayor Bloomberg. And he said that if you start your company, I promise I will fund the company. The city of New York will also fund the company. So that was something that came around, and he said that why are you consuming a job? Why don't you create jobs? And that's it. I probably just needed that one small little push, and that was it. So quit my job, started MyCityWay, and we are a global company now. Since then, it's been uphill. So.
I'd love to hear about how you guys built your teams, both in terms of finding your co-founders and then those like first one or two really critical hires and kind of lessons learned, mistakes made around that. Whoever wants to start.
So co-founder, I actually started the company on my own initially. I would say that lasted for about the first 8 months, and the glaring gap in my whole plan was a CTO, somebody who really understood how to build the technical infrastructure, how to really scale through mobile applications, through SaaS-based solutions. And so I started really connecting with old classmates from Carnegie Mellon University, which is my alma mater. And that is how I found my current co-founder. So he has the honorary title of co-founder. And so he is was our CTO and is currently our CTO. And it was critical, at least for our company, to really find somebody with that technical expertise. And even in hiring and building out the technical side of things, while I remain involved in every single hire, it really is up to him to have a vision on what the tech team looks like, where our needs are, where our gaps are, and build out that talent pipeline for us. And the initial hires, I think I underestimated passion and drive for the industry that I'm in. And so going into it, it was always just about, let's just find somebody really talented who's smart and they can just do it, right? We'll have them on contract and they'll do a great job. And I think I really did underestimate, when somebody's on contract and they're not super passionate about the space that you're in. I mean, you're getting what you pay for. And as a startup, that's probably not very much. So really investing in finding the right couple people can be critical in making or breaking your startup idea and getting to stage 2. So even if you are contracting with somebody, building the vision that it can be long-term, that this can move into a full-time, because not only because it could be a full-time job for them, but because they are passionate about your mission, your vision. And for us, it's about, do you really care about improving communication with local government? Because if that's not your true passion, at the end of the day, their drive is going to wane and some higher bidder is going to come with a more attractive contract, and you're going to lose talent that way. And so for us, that was one of our big mistakes. We didn't make that mistake again, and future hires have really been focused on not only looking for talent, but looking for that passion.
I think a lot of my kind of finding co-founders and hiring the team has been informed by the past startup that I was with. And taking a look at it, I think one of the biggest destructive forces within a startup is the dysfunction that can happen if you don't hire the right people or don't bring the right people together. You can spend so much management time just worried that someone's not working hard enough or they don't have the passion or the drive for the company. And startups are hard enough trying to figure out what the market wants and what the business should be doing, that any extraneous energy and time spent on worrying about those team types of issues can really paralyze the company. So I say this line over and over again to anyone who comes into the startup is, when you're hiring, it's kind of like hiring family. So you need to believe and trust them to that level. You're going to be spending 12 plus hours a day with them. So you need to kind of have that sense of purpose, mission, and belief that they care, they're in it and they care about it just as much as you do. For me, the technology side, I found our CTO pretty early on. We had worked together previously. We had gone to school together previously. So it's really about cultivating relationships and, individuals and kind of bringing that group together of people that you really trust.
So for my co-founder, I worked with him in the past and ended up marrying him. So we worked together for a very long time.
We've got two of those in our family.
Yeah. One of my co-founders is also my husband.
So we have a long history of working together. So kind of the whole thing gelled very well together. And he's the CEO of the company. And since my background all is in technology, I took the CTO role. But I think that it's amazing to have your partner who you've worked with being your husband, but I think there's so much talent out there that people who you've worked with in the past and you've had fun working with, because you need to see that person more than 12 hours a day. So you really need to have that fun environment, a family environment, like Wendy said. And I found that with my husband because I worked with him for a very long time, but it's in each and every one of us. We just have to find the best match and the best talent, and just take it from there.
I just want to add three things around kind of the whole co-founder thing. The first is co-founder. Is it co-founder dating or founder dating? Either founder dating or co-founder dating is a website that you can go onto. Literally, it's like a matchmaking site for co-founders. So if you're a CTO looking for a CEO or vice versa, it's a good website resource. The second thing I wanted to talk about is from investor standpoint, we do tend to be wary of single founder teams. We much prefer multiple founding teams. The reason why is because the data shows that a successful product is going to pivot 2, 3, 7, 20 times before they find the successful things. And multiple founding teams are 2 to 3 times more likely to pivot. And it makes sense, right? If you've got multiple people in a room, they're going to have a diversity of opinion. So for those of you who are, I'm not saying you have to have a co-founder, but investors do tend to prefer it. And the last thing I wanted to say around hiring is I think there's been a ton of focus as of late around like the technical co-founder or the CTO. Figure out what is the critical, really important thing for your company, and then hire around that and then outsource everything else. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. One is Seamless. Wendy brought up Seamless earlier. You know, the really critical hard part about that was onboarding small businesses and restaurants onto this new platform. Wiley Cirilli, their salesperson, knew that Space was an amazing salesperson. That couldn't be outsourced. You know, one of our portfolio companies is He Texted. It's this website where women can post texts from men and asks, like, is he into me? What does this mean? It's a very addictive website. And Lisa, the co-founder, because originally people were like, oh, you need a CTO to build this out. She's like, this is not a technology company. This is a media company. And she went out, and her co-founder is somebody who had deep, deep relationships with Glamour Magazine, Lucky Magazine, and knew how to market to, 18 to 27-year-old women. And as a result, they have 2.5 million users. They have a book deal. They have a movie deal. And she realized that's the critical part of this organization, and that's what I need to hire around. That's what I need to co-founder around. Don't think these are the 4 roles I have to have. Think, what is the hardest part about my company, and hire or co-founder around that.
I just wanted to add on that I've seen companies do this make this mistake, that they compromise talent for friendship or acquaintance, being acquainted to somebody, right? Do not compromise. The one thing that you need in your company is talent. Doesn't matter who that person is. If you think that your husband is talented, hire him or work with him. But if you don't, if just for a relationship, do not compromise on talent.
So we talked about funding earlier. I was wondering, how long did you guys run your companies before you raised funding, and how did you know it was the right time to bring in outside capital? Wendy, let's start with you, and then.
HealthyOut ran the company for, I would say, about 6 months. 6-7 months before we got outside funding. And I think we were, to be fair, it was we were naive entrepreneurs. I had been in San Francisco, and when you read TechCrunch, it seems as if like money grows on trees, and if you have a good idea, you can just go have a meeting with a VC and get $1 million check and be on your way. So at the very beginning of our process, I think because we were business finance people, we got together a pitch deck and we went out, and within the first week, you just realize the bar is much higher. Especially depending on the idea that you have, investors want to see traction. And so at that point, almost immediately, we stopped trying to fundraise and just started working and said, we are going to bootstrap to some traction, whether or not that's a prototype. For us, it was specifically the launch of our product and cracking the top 5 of the iTunes food and drink list with no marketing. So that was enough traction to kind of bring in our first investors, and then from there we ended up raising a $1.2 million round with investors kind of in health, technology, and food. I think the question of when do you bring in funding is you bring in funding when you can bring in funding. It's gas, right? So if you have more capital, you're able to hire more quickly. You're able to test out hypotheses in a much more quick fashion because you have developers on staff who can test out those hypotheses. That being said, there's no point in trying to go get funding unless you can tell a compelling enough story such that an investor will invest. So it's really knowing when you have the right momentum to go and do that.
So we had about 9, close to 10 months before we took any outside capital. And for us, it was really about understanding what the vision of the company was going to look like, because certainly selling to government is not a simple thing. And we understood that it would take a pretty large headcount in order for us to grow the technology, grow the user base, get enough traction where we had a really meaningful, sustainable business. For us, it was a business decision. Do we want to take outside capital, dilute our ownership in the company, but grow faster? And it's the pie analogy. We would own a smaller piece of a much larger thing. Or do we want to have, I'm going to throw the term out, lifestyle company, even though I think that term holds with it some negative connotation sometimes, especially when we're talking about VC investments and things like that. But it's a great, would I love to just have a $5 million, $10 million business? Absolutely. And I own 80% of it? Great. That doesn't sound that bad, right? And so it was a business decision, really understanding what side of the business model you want to fall on. So once we had made a clear understanding of what we wanted to be when we grew up, we raised a small round. It was about 100,000 angel investors. So angel investors are just high wealth individual investors who are investing their own capital. And it's a very different type of investment than going to a venture capitalist to get money that they've actually raised with other investors. And so very personal relationships. There's a lot of relationship management. Obviously, the more angel investors you bring on, the more time you're spending as a founder, CEO, really nurturing those relationships, keeping that communication positive. And from there, we went on to do a seed round and then a Series A round. So in total, we've raised over $6 million to date.
So 1 week was our time from start to finish. We had launched the first consumer. MyCityWay was first when we started, was a consumer business. We expanded to 100 cities worldwide. We still have that all on, but right now we also have our enterprise side of the business. So at that time, we launched the application. There was great traction. We had 100,000 users in the first 40 days. We won multiple competitions, and there was funding just approaching us. So at one point, we had overflowing of interest. So we had to stop it at some point. So I think traction is extremely important. And then, of course, if you believe in the business, that goes a long way as well. Because if you have any hesitations of any sort, it reflects. If you believe in the business, you have traction, it's way to go. Just don't stop yourself.
Mayor Bloomberg told you to start your company, and then people were just shoving money at you. This is a great story. No, but obviously it speaks to.
Yeah, I think the traction was the key here, and the multiple, obviously, awards and everything that we had at that point. Mayor Bloomberg just happened to be one of the investors.
I just wanted to make a little bit of a plug for bootstrapping, which is we are in this environment where we keep hearing about $3 billion and $19 billion valuations. And I just want to make sure that I think right now people's default is to go out and raise money. And it's not that easy. The numbers that I quoted at the beginning, we look at 2,000 companies a year, invest in 10. That's not dissimilar to any angel group or venture capital firm. So it's not as easy as it seems. And then the other thing is, I think people almost think that sometimes raising money is like a path to revenue. And if you don't need it, don't take it. And I just think it shouldn't be this automatic knee-jerk thing to go out and raise capital. If it's the right thing, great. But I think people forget that you can bootstrap. And I've bootstrapped 3 companies and burned through $2 million in venture capital in another. And when you have $2 million, you spend it, right? And so I just want to make a little bit of a plug. It's funny, as an investor, for me to say that, but I probably spend 20% of the companies that come to me, I'm like, why are you raising funding? This is a fantastic company. Just go own all of it, and whatever the case may be.
I absolutely agree. we actually had bootstrapped the first about roughly 10 months. And Wendy, I'm not sure like your first 6 months what you guys did, but it was our own money. It was our own sort of investment that we were putting in, whether it was, paying for my own rent without income coming in, or hiring those contractors who were going to help us build out that prototype, et cetera, et cetera. The list goes on. But it was really being scrappy, figuring out, hey, how am I going to get this done by this deadline with whatever I have in my bank account, right? And still eat and pay my rent and not be homeless. And so that was a big consideration for us, was how long can we last on our own investment if we were to do this full time. Ideally, if we had been able to bootstrap, that would have been a great model for us. Unfortunately, we weren't able to do that, but there are great examples out there of companies who have. So
I definitely did. We all bootstrapped the first 6 months. I think the only caution that I would say to that, and of course, if you can bootstrap, but if you're the one complication does come in when you're trying to hire a technical team, and the technical team is getting paid $140,000 at Google. And how do you kind of attract talent and kind of offer your technical talent something to live off of as you ask them to also take career risks? And I think bootstrapping is great. It does fit a specific profile like me. I was the type of entrepreneur who could bootstrap, didn't have any liabilities, didn't need that much. But, one of our star tech developers has a family of 2, and he needs to be able to support his family. So I think it just depends. It depends on your access to resources that will drive your business.
Yeah, I think that if you're a high growth company and you need money, just go for it. Because what happened with us was after the first round, BMW, we were just talking to BMW for a deal. And when they saw what was under the hood, they offered to lead the round, the Series A round. And at that point, we thought we did not really need money, but we were on a really high growth track. So at that point, it just made sense for us to raise another round. So it kind of worked out really well.
At this point, actually, I have some more questions, but I wanted to open it up for the audience in terms of specific questions you guys might have had, but anything that we've talked about to this point. Yes. So the question is if you give equity to co-founders, or how about more broadly, how do you guys compensate co-founders? So I guess maybe we break it up into like co-founders from the beginning, and then maybe like a late stage joining co-founder, which it sounds like you more had. So you guys had co-founders from the beginning, right? So how did you guys do equity split for the two of you?
That was to me.
Yeah, to Wendy or either.
So there were 3 co-founders on our team. So me, my husband, and our CTO. I actually had a very lengthy conversation with a good friend who was CEO of Kabam, which is a social gaming company. It's done really well. And talked to him about equity splits and what made sense. And I think that the bad way to do it potentially is to split the equity equally among the co-founding team. That was his kind of advice to not do, that certain roles take on certain amounts of equity based upon their value to the company over the long term. And equity should always be vested. So that was the kind of 2 key things. Anyone who works at HealthyOut, who's a full-time employee, gets equity. You're taking on significant amount of risks by joining a startup. And, I want anyone who's like a first 10 employees at HealthyOut to reap the financial reward as well. I think it just creates for better incentives for everyone. So,
Wendy, can you define vesting and what that usually looks like?
Yes. So vesting is the amount of equity that you're granted. You get it after a period of time. For most startups, they typically vest over 4 years. Co-founders might actually have different type of vesting, so it might be monthly vesting because they were very early on, but everyone is on generally a 4-year vesting schedule. And then there could be some clauses like you must kind of survive the first year before you actually get any amount of equity. So
I think we see really common a 1-year cliff and then monthly after that is a really common vesting schedule. Sonpreet, what about you? How did you guys think about equity split?
In the beginning, when three of us, we were 3 co-founders, when we decided to take up our roles, it was pretty equal. So we thought that and it worked out really well because everybody has skin in the game. They're equally responsible for the roles, and they were pretty significant roles. But I think that each and every employee of the company should have some equity. Now, it's up to the company and the decision makers to decide how much and what it is. But I think that keeps the whole culture of the company going, and they skin in the game. They just vouch for the company all the time, and there's so much hard work that you need to, apart from motivating, they know that there's growth and they are growing with the company.
I just want to echo, whether you have an even equity split or unequal, it is very important to have very, very clear-cut roles. You don't want to have like 3 co-founders with no titles. You should have a CEO, a COO, and a CTO, and very clearly know what people are best at and what role they're playing. Lily, in terms of you had more of a late stage co-founder. How did that work?
I brought on my co-founder at a later stage in the company. We had already had some traction. We had some commitments in for external investment. So really the risk, while it was still there, certainly, and it still is, it definitely wasn't as high as if he had committed 6 months earlier when we were just starting out. So the equity isn't equal, but it reflects sort of the amount of risk you're putting in. And of course, your role plays a big part in it, but CTO, CEO role, both very important in the company, at least our company, since we're pretty tech heavy. In terms of new employees, it's everyone gets equity and it's a negotiating chip. And so if people want a higher salary, they're taking less equity. If they're in a position where they can take less cash, then they can get more equity. And so we really just use it as a negotiating tool as well. It's something that really does incentivize people to motivate them to create the best product, to be the best employees, and really feel like they're owning something at the end of the day. Something just to note, and this, I didn't know this coming into starting the company and taking venture cap, but as a founder, you might think, I started this. This was my baby. This was my idea. I started in my bedroom. Shouldn't I own all of my equity? But actually, when you do take this external investment with the vesting schedule, even as a founder, you are not fully vested, meaning you do not own all of your shares. So if you own 50% of the company, your co-founder owns the other, you still need to put in the 4 years or whatever the term is that you negotiate to actually own all of your equity. So you are on that same schedule you're putting your new employees and your first hires on. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are looking for external investment.
I just wanted to add on that equal might work or might not work. If you look at Salesforce, 65 plus is owned by the one CEO, right? So it depends on what the situation is, what the role is of the person, and when does the person come into the company.
2 quick rules of thumbs that will help you guys is people typically set aside 15 to 20% for an employee stock pool. And typically each round that you raise, you're going to give away to 20 to 25% of your company. Those are very, very averaged numbers, and there's clearly exceptions all over the place, but in terms of averages, that's what we tend to see. Companies will reserve 15 to 20% of their equity for employees. And then in each round, they'll give away 20 to 25% of their company. So if you're raising $1 million on a $4 million valuation, you've now given away 20%. That is a very typical first round raise that we'll see. Or they're raising $500,000 on $2 million. Yes.
Would love to hear from each of you. You've all started. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I've invested. What would you like from your ideal investor? You all have gone through the rounds, and I think a lot of people here would like to know
So the question is, what do you look for in an ideal investor? I'm going to start with you.
They are horrible ones, yes, for sure. I think that what an entrepreneur needs is their own space to innovate. I think if there's not too much of demand on meeting every now and then and the presentations and all that, that's really helpful. You give them their own space for innovation, and then you have your set meetings wherever they are. If they're monthly board meetings or whatever, once in 3 months, I think it gives a lot of room to the entrepreneurs to innovate. And then I think I've seen that our investors have been really helpful with introductions. They believe in the company, they make introductions. It's as simple as that, right? So introductions are great. And recently we've seen that iVentures, that's one of our investing VC firms, has this annual agenda where they bring in all the successful entrepreneurs as speakers. And then we have different sessions, breakout rooms, so that's really helpful as well.
I think a great investor is like a good parent or a good advisor. So they give you enough room to grow and do what you need to do, but they check in with you once in a while, make sure that you're not in the weeds. I think one of the things I underestimated is how much that investors' network and or expertise can add to your business. So one good example is one of our investors is 500 Startups, and they just have an amazing network of mentors that will literally do office hours with any of their portfolio companies like once a week on how to do Facebook marketing super well, how to market yourself super well, how to do email marketing, just essentially any type of core capability. So I also wouldn't underestimate taking a look at the resources that the investor provides, especially at the seed level. But otherwise, like angel investors, people who are passionate about your mission, who care about it above and beyond just a financial return, and people that you get along with. So that's kind of what I would look for in a good investor.
For me, it's really about a great investor is somebody who can really read a person and understand how to be the most supportive for that person. It sounds like we're all very similar in the sense that I'm the same way. I prefer to have my own space, figure out what it is I need, the company needs, our staff needs, and then I'll go to our investor base and see if anyone can help. And so investors that really understand how to best support the entrepreneur. Certainly, I'm sure there are entrepreneurs who would love a more hands-on investor, and to be able to read that relationship appropriately and then respond. The other thing that I now look for in investors is, how did they deal with a tough situation? Did they act with grace? Were they extremely supportive? Whether or not they were disappointed, angry, whatever it was, how did they respond? And I think that really defines a person. I think of it as if I were dating somebody. How are they in the worst of moments? And if that can still, if the relationship can still survive that, then they will be an incredible investor, and that relationship will survive anything. So in doing my due diligence on investors, I'm always asking their other investments, what is it like when the company wasn't doing well, when you didn't hit your metrics, when that model you built was completely wrong, because it always is. And so these are the things I look for in investors that really stand out.
I was just going to add on that. So there's a wealth of information out there, right? So do not reinvent the wheel. The relationship has to be so amazing that you should be able to go back to them at any point and ask any question that you want. Because the more you reinvent, you just carry baggage and you make more work for yourself. There's so much that's already done. well, I wish we were doing rocket science, but this is what we're building is not at the rocket science level at this point. So there's so much information and so much that's already out there.
Yes.
I was just wondering, you mentioned 500 startups. Have you guys done?
There was mention of the 500 startups, and I just wanted to see if you or any of the other panelists had done other incubators or accelerators.
So Wendy did Blueprint. Yeah. So Lily, what were you saying? Oh.
I have as well, so yeah.
Go ahead, Wendy.
So we joined. So 500 was actually a seed investment. We weren't a part of their accelerator. It's an interesting story how we got a seed investment that I'll tell people later. So we joined Blueprint Health, which is an accelerator here based in New York that focuses on companies that have an impact on people's health and wellness, which was a great experience for us. And same thing that you would look for in terms of investors, because an accelerator is an even more hands-on investor. So you want to make sure that you very much get along with the founders or the people who are heading up and are core to that program, and that they believe passionately in your success, and that you can develop really great personal relationships with them, because you're going to be relying on them to make introductions, to prioritize your company over another company potentially. So those are some kind of same rules apply to an accelerator as an investor.
What was the name of that?
Blueprint Health.
So I'm an example of somebody who really switched industries completely. So all of these terms we're throwing out seems very natural to me now, but when I first started PublicStuff, I had no idea what any of this meant. All I knew is that I saw a need in my industry and I wanted to solve it. So the first thing I did was actually sort of an incubator, but it was more for the individual and less for the idea. And so I think of it more like a little mini MBA program for myself, really just to understand what I needed to be educated on in order to start a company. But the business incubator that we did for PublicStuff is actually here in New York City. It's called ERA, Entrepreneurs Roundtable Accelerator. Highly recommend it. We were their inaugural class. I believe they still accept 10 companies. And I think they do it 3 or 4 times a year at this point. So applications are actually open. I think the deadline is sometime in April. So check it out online. They're a great incubator. Actually, because of our participation in them, we closed most of our investment, which has been, again, over $6 million. So they've been great to promote the company, but really just like a boot camp in understanding how your business model is flawed, how you pitch it, building your team out, etc.
And I just realized we didn't. It's ERA. I realized we didn't explain what an accelerator and an incubator is. There's lots of different flavors, but at the most basic level, they'll give you usually $25,000 to $50,000 for a piece of equity in you, and they basically polish you as a company from their startup weekend. So there's like these weekend programs all the way up to like a 6-month program, or probably even year-long programs. And they help you with the team, the product, the marketing, and at the end you have a demo day, and they show you off to a bunch of investors. And ERA, they have a fantastic show. There's like 700 investors show up. There's like music and lights and dances. It's a lot of fun. And it's a great way. For those of you who are interested in accelerators, on the 37 Angels website, if you go all the way to the right, we list the 70 or 80 accelerators and incubators in New York City by tech. So we have blueprints, we have 10 health and wellness incubators. There's food incubators, there's art incubators, nonprofit incubators, ed tech incubators. Whatever you want, there is an incubator for you. And then also, just in terms of terms, we also have a glossary on our website. Again, all the way to the right under resources. Yes.
How much do investors want from you when they invest in you at any of these levels? What do you expect to have to them?
So the question is, what do investors want from you?
Of money or percentage or
Equity. I see. Do you guys have so I guess, okay, I'll give you average numbers again. The average seed stage company is valued at $2.5 million. That's That's just based on the Halo report. It is trending upwards. I think the last one might have been $2.7 million. And I'll start with angel investors. Angel investors tend to write like a $25,000 check. So that means that I now own 1% of your company because I give you $25,000, you're worth $2.5 million. Again, these are, I hate speaking in averages around this ecosystem because there's just so much variation, but that's one very typical example. And like I said, usually in each round, an organization will give away 20 to 25% of their company. It wildly varies by organization, right? So if you think about like a Greycroft or a Bessemer, they're going to want to own that whole round because for their math to work, they have to take 20% of your company. So it very much depends. I don't know, do you guys have any kind of general advice above and beyond that? Yeah.
I guess my general advice is not to worry as much about equity early on, or the investors kind of stake within equity. Equity doesn't mean anything unless there's some liquidity value at some point in time. So you're kind of talking paper money until then, right? Like they're going to own 5% of something that may or may not exist in 2 or 5 years, and so. To kind of as a co-founder, I know it's kind of giving up a chunk of your company and they're not in it, but at the same time, I would be looser with some of those things early on. Just my general advice.
Same. I would say don't sweat the equity initially. If you're going into an incubator, it's normally preset terms, so you really can't negotiate. If they're giving you $25,000 and you've been accepted, or $48,000, which is ERA at this point, they give you $40,000. I'm not sure what the equity trade-off is there, but again, it's take it or leave it kind of model with incubators, unless it's their first round and you might have some room. With angels, you have some room for negotiation as well as other investors, but again, there are industry standards and it depends on the stage your company is in, and so the numbers really can vary. So,
I think one mistake that entrepreneurs do is they want more money. They take more money than they need. So for us, in our seed round, we had a lot more interest than what we took, and the reason is that we just wanted to give that much. That's the kind of equity we wanted to give out, and that's the kind of money we needed to start the company. So I think that balance is extremely important.
Back.
Hi. I just wanted to know what kind of legal challenges you think most startups would face, and I know that's really important to protect your intellectual property and to set up the right corporation status, and also as a follow-up. When do you start looking for in-house counsel versus outside counsel?
Whoever wants to take this question.
I'll take this question because I am, so it's good to have different roles within the company. I am the CEO, and so therefore I tend to not worry that much about the legal issues and ramifications. Our COO cares a lot, which is good because he's our COO. And so my general sense that and so we both will give conflicting advice. So I'll represent both of us well since I'm on the panel here. But my advice to early entrepreneurs is to spend the least amount of time on legal and financial and administrative things to the extent that you're not breaking the law, because your sole purpose is to figure out if you have product market fit of some kind, if you have a real business. So all of those other things are kind of nice and extraneous, but your role should really be focused on whether or not this is a business. My CEO would probably say something different, and which is why we had a good lawyer to start, and that's made kind of, I'm sure, the financing and all of those things not a big nightmare. But those are the things that I don't have to worry about because someone else is worrying about them for me.
If you think about why companies fail, I would say it's like 1% for legal issues. They fail because of product market fit. They fail because the team implodes. They fail because you can't get customers to pay for your product. So the legal stuff, Yeah, I will say this. One resource is ORIC Total Access, ORRICK Total Access. They have like build your own term sheets. They do a ton of webinars. They're all free. So it's a lot of just kind of cheap, free legal advice to help you kind of bootstrap that part of it as much as you can. And then ORIC Total Access. So ORIC is a law firm, ORRICK, and then Total Access is their program for entrepreneurs, which is very low-cost legal advice because they want all of you guys as clients when you're wildly successful. And then same thing, I'd say the same thing about finance just because Wendy touched on it. Like a CFO in general tends to be like a not first 5 employee hire. Like don't worry about having the most beautiful spreadsheets in the world. Worry about having an awesome product.
That being said, cash management is a very important part of finances, and that is something that you should be thinking and worried about constantly. So even as a CEO.
But I think I would not ignore it because I've known companies, and these are big companies, and I've heard from amazing VCs as well, that that there were mistakes even with the in-house counsel that they would have landed up in jail. So just be careful, do not break the law, and just be careful of those things. And that's where the VCs step in, right? That's where you have advice from the VCs, who to go to and who is the legal advisor that you should get. But so early on, we do not have an in-house. We just have a very good legal advisor, but we do not have anybody in-house.
Yeah, we actually started, the first thing our angel investors asked us was, how are you incorporated and where? And the answer was LLC in Delaware, which was fine, and that actually worked out perfectly. And then the next time we sought legal counsel was when we were writing up, our first sales contracts for cities, just to make sure it was legitimate. So, these are sort of one-off things and affordable for a startup company. At this point, we do have a big legal firm that represents us. So we have the expensive legal firms that dealt with our seed Series A and our Series A investments and any big legal things that come up. And then we have sort of our more affordable lawyer that we go to for smaller things, right? When we just want him to change a paragraph in our sales agreement or something small, review something quickly. So it's always nice to have multiple resources of people that you trust, and who really understand your business.
And I would say that don't hesitate to ask, because with VC companies, they also have COOs in the company, right? So that's the first step that you could take if needed.
I saw another hand. Yes.
On advisors. When was the kind of the right time for you to look for advisors, and what did you look in your advisor, and how much equity generally, 0.25, 0.5, 1, what was it based off of?
So when's the right time to pick an advisor, and then how do you compensate them?
Actually, I'll let Wendy speak to this more. We don't actually have an official advisory board at this point. We're actually looking to build one right now. What I've heard is pretty standard is 0.25%, and being very clear on deliverables. So what are you looking for in an investor? Is it introductions? Is it getting press about you? Is it endorsing you somewhere at a conference and getting you leads? So what is it that you actually need from that investor? And really sticking to that. So making sure, on a quarterly or biannual basis, you're checking in to make sure that they have the ammunition they need to get that done. So that's something we're in the process of doing right now. We have a lot of informal advisors. These are people, mentors that we've met, people in the industry who are just great people, willing to give us advice, endorse us, make introductions without taking the equity. So we've definitely gone that route initially. And, it's been almost 3 years and we haven't had an official board, and it's been fine. But at this point, we feel like it could really help the business.
Yeah, I'd echo what Lily said. I kind of have taken the same approach. Advisors are really personal mentors of mine that I've picked up kind of throughout my career. That being said, always open to kind of seeing who else could potentially add value, who I enjoy working with to kind of add as an advisor. Informally, we we do have two formal advisors who we have given equity to, and that's because they serve a very specific function that we could not pay for in terms of cash. One is like a creative advisor who he works for a really top-notch kind of firm, and we couldn't afford that type of advice from a actual paying the firm kind of way, and so therefore he's an advisor and we give him equity. So that's in general. I would kind of echo what Lily said. Try to get advisors who are more like mentors, who don't necessarily take equity unless you have them doing something very specific for you.
Yeah, I agree with both, but I think up to 1% is what I've seen.
You in the back and then in the front.
I was wondering what kind of resources do you use to do market research? So, for example, whether my product will be a viable one, and what are the competitors, and what are the trends in this particular market segment or industry?
Can I take this only because I feel very passionately that market research is useless? Test your product in the marketplace, see if someone will buy it. All the surveys in the world are useless. Consumers are terrible at willingness to pay surveys. They have no idea. Test it. But I'm very extreme, so I'd love to hear other.
I actually agree. Think about Apple, right? Apple didn't go out and say, do you like this phone? Shall I build it, not build it? They just said, this is it for you. And it was a best product, right? So if you have a team, if you believe in your product, and if you have a team of amazing people that believe in that vision, build it and test it out.
I'm going to disagree a little bit in the sense that I think market research has morphed into something different now. Maybe for a consumer startup back in the day, it could have been, or if you're with a large firm, surveys are useful. But the best way to test is to, for us, the way that we do it is we put up landing pages and we see if people will put down their credit card. And we essentially try to pre-sell it without you thinking that we have it. We don't have it. We're going to put up a landing page and show you what the product is and see if you're willing to put down your credit card. And the reason why we do that is it's not just about the product, but it's also about how hard or how expensive it is to acquire that customer. So within that process of doing something like that, and this is very specific to a consumer company as well, not so much enterprise, but I've heard people kind of take the same approach of, creating sales materials and calling enterprises and trying to pre-sell it even before they have it, because it starts to inform what's important to the customer, what features matter, what people are willing to pay for, and what people are not willing to pay for. And so unless you can kind of, the approach of build, launch, see can get very expensive. So my kind of take on it is try to put up something that feels like it's real and see how people react to it. And the other great way, I think, that to do market research, and I use very extensively, is Facebook ads. Because what you can do is start to create different segments, like, does this appeal to men? Does this appeal to women? Does it appeal to people age 18 to 24, 24 to 32? And you can finally target and create those segments and run kind of ABC tests with those segments to understand the demand of your product and who's most engaged with it. So I kind of use Facebook as my market research.
I wholeheartly agree. And I think that's what I mean. When I say market research, I was thinking surveys, but to me, that's selling your product, and I think that's great. I just want to give you guys some tools. Launch Rock. You can create a landing page, a beautiful landing page, in 5 minutes. Use it. Usertesting.com is a great one. Balsamic is a great way to create like a wireframe for like an app so that you can like build it, as opposed to hiring someone. Like, it used to cost $50,000 to build an app. You can now do it for like 50, like just in terms of the wireframe so people can see what it looks like. App Architect, you can build a mobile app. If you can use a PowerPoint, you can build a mobile app using App Architect. Just trying to find a couple others. LaunchRock, Balsamic is a wireframe. Balsamic with a Q at the end. Usertesting.com, App Architect. What are other favorite ones that you guys use? Like really cheap ways to do like A/B testing like that, like to pre-sell.
Wireframe is kind of like a blueprint for whatever web or technology. It's like a sketch. It's a really nice sketch.
Wireframe comes just before design.
Right. It's not yet, but I should put this list up on our website.
But yeah, I agree with that's what I meant when I said build. That build and then test, right? Not completely build. If it takes $50,000, don't spend that money up front. And this is a really good example that I like from TripAdvisor. There was an interview with the CEO, and he said that sometimes to test out a feature, they just put out a link, and if the users click on the link, it says 404 error, right? And it's okay for that to happen, but then they know how many users clicked on it, how many were interested in it, and then they go out build it. Yeah.
When I heard your question, I thought you meant market research, like industry research, which I agree is a huge waste of time, at least from an entrepreneurial perspective. The reason why we did it was for our investors. They had the same questions that we had to answer. What is the market size? What's the addressable market? How many potential customers are out there? What's the full list of the competitive landscape? And give me their feature sets. So we had to build this extensive report before we could even really pitch them successfully. And so being an expert Googler definitely came in handy. Utilizing, if you can get somebody who is currently at school or in a grad program where you can get into the university library, they have a ton of resources that as a company or individual, you would normally have to pay thousands of dollars for these reports that come out normally quarterly. And of course, if you know people in VC firms or investment firms, they have access to these reports and data as well. But oftentimes you can get little bits and pieces that are published or quoted. And as long as you can source it, you can use it. So that's what we did in doing some market research.
But absolutely, you need to do your research for the product market fit. You need to know what you're building and create the minimal viable product. And that should be enough to get you going.
Yes, go ahead.
How concerned should you be about protecting your product when you're first starting? Like, we have this idea that we're not telling anybody about at all. So, we're worried
Like
that
leaping to answer this
somebody
question.
will take the idea or somebody will take the name.
Yeah.
Like, should we be worried about that, or should we just go out and start talking to people and seeing if people think it's a good idea?
So how important is it to protect your idea, NDAs, IP, all that kind of stuff? I will
Yeah. I'll answer that because I am I'm very much of the firm belief that you should be talking about it as openly as possible with everyone you know, especially your customers. Healthy online ordering is not a unique idea. I've actually had 1 billion people email me and say, I've had that idea. So the truth is whether or not you execute it well, and whether or not you understand what's going to drive that business. And the best way to do that is to talk to people who are in the industry who have done it before and have failed, who sometimes even talking to your competitors kind of slyly is a good idea. Talking to customers a ton. You should be sharing it with all of your potential customers and seeing whether or not they would be customers. So I think I'm very much of the faction of do not build in isolation. Tell your idea to everyone. You don't necessarily have to listen, but it's much better to kind of get it out there and start vetting it, and instead of building it in a vacuum.
So I actually have a couple of friends who are starting their companies, and they're in stealth mode too. Oh, so that's one of the terms we throw out is stealth mode. And so are you in stealth mode right now, which are people who aren't really open to talking about the details of their company. And so there's a way to do it in which you are talking about it, but you're not providing details. It depends on, how, is there a lot of intellectual property, things that you're getting, there's high tech involved and you don't want that to be released. I think there's a way to talk about what you're doing without giving all of the details away. For example, I'm sure most of you don't really know what PublicStuff is yet until you actually see it. But when we were pitching it or just talking about it initially, it was about improving communication between residents and their local government through web and mobile tools, very broad-based. And then obviously if there are people who are interested in digging deeper and really understanding, okay, what do you mean by communication? What mobile app and what is it going to do, right? And then depending on who they are investor asking you want to be open. Is it a potential partner, co-founder hire? Then you might want to be open. Is it a potential competitor, then you might want to hold off a little bit on the details. But I think there's a nice balance that you can meet in talking about your idea.
It doesn't take much to protect the name, right? So if you think that there are a few things that need to be protected before you go out, just do it and then go all out.
One thing I would say is don't ask an investor to sign an NDA. It's a sign of a pretty unsophisticated entrepreneur if you do it, with two very, very minor exceptions, like chemical compounds, like so if you're doing life sciences, or if they're doing like a tech audit and they're looking at your code. But even so, we're not going to try to steal it. So don't ask investors to sign NDAs. Most of them won't, and it actually will make you look like a very unsophisticated entrepreneur. Question for maybe this side of the room.
I just had a follow-up comment to when you were talking about not to use a lawyer. And I am a corporate lawyer, and we have seen things that can happen. So I just wanted to clarify that point, because I agree with you that early on, the legal stuff isn't going to be what kills a company. But later on, like, let's face it, when nobody's making money, nobody's looking at the legal stuff. When there's money to be made, that's when everybody starts looking. And disputes between partners can be very, very dangerous. If anybody sues, your chances of an IPO are over. So I would say very early on, spend some money on employment agreements with your key founders, your equity agreements, and also to dovetail, pay the money for trademarking if that's truly important early on, because you're building goodwill under that name. And so it's truly, truly important. And investors, do look at that kind of stuff because, we're investors as well. So I just wanted to, clarify that point.
I'm feeling a little bit of like people maybe are eager to get food. And let's take a few more questions and then we can break out. Yes, go ahead.
A few questions about your journeys. So firstly, how long was it before you quit your day job? Secondly, what does success look like for you? And thirdly, do you have an exit strategy?
Big question. Yeah. Do you guys want to each take one? So the three questions is, what does success look like for you? Exit strategy, and what was the first one?
How long did it take before you quit your day job?
Okay, so how long? Let's just...
So for me, it was about 6 months before I decided to quit my day job. So a lot of moonlighting, lots of weekends, lots of research and discussions openly with other people to get feedback, and especially with the people I would be selling to, which are local governments. So,
how long for you, Wendy?
I have an interesting story in the sense that I quit my job. I spent 6 months in East Africa volunteering, 6 months traveling, and then I got back and started HealthyOut. So I had quit my job, and it was the perfect opportunity to kind of take that risk.
So me and my co-founder, my husband, quit our jobs at the same time. But it was well worth it. It was 2 months before we got actual funding.
What does success look like for you?
For me? For us? Success as in IPO? Success? IPO?
I I founded the company, or the co-founders founded the company because we actually wanted to make an impact on people's health. That's like why we work the 14-hour days that we do. So success for me is it's having an impact, solving a tangible problem for people, having an impact on their health, and creating a company that is sustainable. So that's how I define success.
Similar. So my definition of success is really taking a big social challenge, a social problem, which I think is government's not really being transparent, very difficult for people to feel ownership of their local neighborhoods, and hopefully being able to see the needle move on communities across the country, not just big cities like New York City being open, but the small town upstate or in the middle of Texas being open to their residents and being inclusive. And so if we can actually make a tangible change and see our product penetrating a very large market here in the US and internationally, for me, that's success. And hopefully we do well financially in all of that as well.
And then what about exit strategy for you?
Exit strategy. Well, not a lot of IPOs for startups these days, but for us, obviously, I wouldn't be against that. But some other exit strategies would be obviously acquisition and mergers with strategic partners that we define in the space. And the other successful exit, I think, would just be growing the company to become sustainable, profitable, to the point where it's not really dependent on the founders anymore. You know, we could very well leave and bring in new management and the company is going to grow. To me, that's a great success if I can see that I created a great company, a big company, and have employed X number of people. So.
You know, as a consumer company, there's multiple avenues for exit, but I actually can honestly say I would be happy running HealthyOut 20 years from now. So exit isn't kind of isn't something that's on the mind. So we could get acquired, we could one day go IPO, but I would just as happily be running HealthyOut 20 years from now.
Okay. Any other questions? Yes.
I have a question about marketing. So in the early days, I imagine you had, thank you. In the early days, I imagine you had a small or no marketing budget. So how did you build up your user base, get the word out about your app, and find that kind of traction?
I'll go first because I was app based. So if it's a consumer stuff is tough because your business isn't going to grow unless there's a level of organic growth there. And for us, we had built a product, we had released it to the App Store, and it naturally started getting downloads. And then from there, you can game it, you can learn kind of how to do search, App Store optimization. You know, my background's kind of online marketing, so that helped out with that process. But as a consumer business, it's really not going to work unless you have some basic organic level of marketing or of kind of organic growth. Then from there, it's, you know, the tricks of the trade. It's online marketing, so paid advertising, it's PR, it's partnerships. Those are kind of the key ways to kind of grow your base. And it differs based upon what type of industry you're in and what kind of product you have, but underneath is organic product market fit.
So for B2B, very different. For us, it was defining and trying to figure out where are our prospects and potential clients going to be. So doing a lot of research and coming up with lists of events that we needed to be at, conferences that we were willing to splurge and put down money for the potential of getting in X number of hot leads and meeting people face to face. But these type of events for us, we've now been able to define the top 5 events we need to be at every single year, where our small investment in getting that booth or that speaking session is going to come back tenfold because of the people we can meet there, the relationships we build, and the clients that'll sign up. Publications, being seen as a thought leader is important to us. So getting out there, whether it's myself speaking at events or other people in the company, and it takes a lot of time to really build up your brand through some word of mouth marketing, but a lot of strategic event and publication marketing.
So MyCityWay started off as a consumer company, and we expanded to 100 cities worldwide. We had 6 million users organically, because paid marketing can be very expensive. It can just suck up all the money, and that's not what startups are spending the money on, right? They're spending on innovating and technology and whatnot. So all that was organic. We then pivoted to be an enterprise company. And we have, at the moment, clients in all industries, automotive, real estate, media, USA Today, Daily News, BMW, American Express, and you name it, and we have them as clients. So I think on the B2B side, it's very different from the consumer side. B2B is some of the things mentioned, but also it's word of mouth. It's all in your product. So our platform has been pretty much, once we start a project with a company, the platform is so solid that it talks for itself. So I think everything is in the product itself. And then of course the other things like PR and other basic stuff that can be done. But I think the product has to be very solid and stable.
I wanted to make a comment as a lawyer, but also as an investor through Golden Seeds in women-run companies. The comment is, I fully agree with my fellow lawyer that you do need to be a little bit careful in the beginning to just make sure that the little things that can go wrong big time later, that you've dealt with them. And one of them is a control issue. I think, each of you has really defined what you wanted to do, has a vision, and it's important to try to, as you spread thinner with investors, with incubators, with accelerators, with talent, to stay in control for the period of time that you need to really make sure that your vision is out there. If you lose control too early, it's a very sad state. The other thing I just wanted to mention for those in the audience who are interested in some of the social entrepreneurship and doing good as well as doing well, there's a new concept out there that a lot of people haven't used as much yet, called the B Corp, the benefit corporation. And I just throw it out. LLC is kind of the common or partnership, the way people go. But a new kind of thinking is that if you have in your charter that you are not just profit driven, but also are interested in some social change, you can actually put that in a charter now, and there is a growing trend in the United States to have that kind of corporation where you can work with that goal as well.
Thank you. I also just realized there's one question that was asked at the very beginning that we didn't get to, which is around crowdfunding, and I think it came from over here. You brought up legal issues. It's another kind of new, uncharted space. And first of all, just defining crowdfunding, there's two types. There's the Kickstarters and Indiegogos of the world, where you give me $5 and I give you a T-shirt or a tchotchke or the product itself. And then there's crowdfunding under the Jobs Act, which is you give me $5 and I give you 0.0001% of my company, and it's equity crowdfunding. And so I guess, who asked the question around crowdfunding, and which of the two were you asking about?
I was asking about the Jobs Act because I have an opinion on it. And we've certainly spoken with many entrepreneurs, and we've debated the merits many times. And so I was just curious, I haven't seen it yet on my side, so I was curious with, your extensive network, Angela, if you had seen it.
So I think the first one, the Kickstarters and Indiegos, I just want to say I think is great for B2C companies as a proof of concept. I think the second type I'll be honest, we stayed a little bit away from it because there's a big angel network in New York who's gotten in legal trouble around it, because I think that the rules around it are still a little bit too nebulous. And we feel no need to be the early adopters in that space. We're on AngelList and all that kind of stuff, but it's not a path that we're aggressively pursuing. There are a lot of organizations who we're close to, and we're letting them lead the charge, and we're going to be very secondary followers, but we don't feel like we know the space well enough, and there's just too much murkiness around the legality that frankly it makes us very nervous. But I think it's great. Once it gets sorted out, I think it's great for entrepreneurs.
We don't have a plan for how to make money. So, because it's not something like, you know, the sort of companies that you have that have somebody that would pay, you know, to have what you have. Like, our idea is to have an app that people can download and hopefully to have volume so that advertisers will want to advertise. Is that a viable model still?
So the question is, like, we're just going to have a ton of users and no revenue model still a viable model? So clearly there are the exceptions, and we all hear about them. It is tough at this point. So I would say around monetization, you don't have to have already made money, but I think you have to have a plan to make money. And you have to know at $100,000, these advertisers become interested, and this is what they'll pay for a click or an eyeball, right? You have to know that. It's okay if you've made zero money to date, but you have to have a plan to monetize at some point. And I don't think an investor would go that we're just going to get, you know, 1 billion eyeballs and advertisers will come. I think it's a tough one to sell in today's fundraising environment. Yes.
Do you have any practical advice on how to negotiate and how to talk about business seriously with your husband or a good friend of yours who you've been, you know, with for just a personal relationship for a long time? Now you're in like a startup business.
So the question is, how do you talk about, you've had a personal friendship with someone, how do you talk about like a business negotiation with that friend? Yeah, advice?
Given the given the fact that we're both co-founders with our husbands, I think it's establishing a professional relationship. And I was just telling, I think, Angela before this, that we had an employee who did not know that we were married for the first 6 weeks he was hired, because he just had no idea. Like, we just didn't act like we were together because we were at work, and you should act a certain way when you're at work, and you know there's no explicit PDAs and anything like that. So you treat your friend or the person that you have a personal relationship as a coworker, and you kind of keep it very professional that way. So I guess the advice is to treat that person like you would treat another coworker within your company. It does get dicey when you start working with friends and people you have personal relationships with. So you just need to make sure that you're willing to put that friendship or that personal relationship on the line, and the strength of that relationship, that it can endure really tough conversations and decisions, and the power dynamic that happens when you may be the boss or you're not.
Yeah, it can get very complicated. you gotta be a little careful. To Wendy's point, our employees did not know for 3 years that we were. And the only reason they got to know was because we won this Wall Street Journal award recently. Actually, 4 years they did not know. Nobody in the company knew, and then they were in a state of shock. And I wrote an article in Wall Street Journal recently on my co-founder being my better half, and that's how a lot of people got to know. So keep it extremely professional, extremely professional. Otherwise, it can really get very hairy. I've seen that with friends. It can get really hairy if it's not professional.
Yeah, I've seen some terrible examples of close friends. And, first I'll say it's a testament to your relationship and the people if they can make it work, because a startup is so challenging in every aspect. It's not just your 9 to 5, it's your 5 to 2 a.m. It's everything when you're first starting a company, especially when you're putting your own skin in the game. You're investing your own money, your own time, you're quitting your job. And so you really need to understand the person that you're about to embark on with. Are they of the nature where they can take very stressful situations? One way to gauge that is just, again, the way that I would look at a potential investor is how did they deal with tough situations? And so what sort of data points do you have with your friends or this person that would show you that they can survive this? And the other thing I would say is just being very upfront in the beginning about talking about equity, talking about conversations that will only get harder the further along you get and the more you ignore that conversation. Equity is a tough thing to talk about unless it's 50-50, but if it's not, it's pretty hard, right? Does the CEO get more? Does the COO get more? Does the CTO get more? And you're starting to talk about values. You're starting to talk about skill sets. And so I think just trying to be as upfront and transparent as you can really help in the long run. So,
and I would just repeat, do not compromise on talent just because of friendship, because you need that talent more than the friendship in the company.
Two quick things I just wanted to add regarding raising friends and family, and then also using your personal network to get referrals. I would say regarding the first point, raising friends and family, just you need to really clearly set expectations about how risky of an investment this is. And I actually think friends and family is the most expensive capital you can raise. And realize, if it goes south, you have to see these people at Thanksgiving for the rest of your life, right? So that's one. And then regarding using kind of your friends' referrals, so I remember one of our startups, we knew that we would be using a lot of our personal referrals to get business. But when we started, we tested on people who were not dear friends of ours, right? So before we tested with Pfizer and American Express and our friends who had contacts there, we tested people we didn't know, much smaller companies, and we got it right before I put a friendship business relationship in jeopardy. So I knew I would make them look good by referring me. So I would just be very careful.
One big question for all of you, because in hindsight, you've all made mistakes, for sure, right? Ideally, you can talk about the worst, the best. What would have you done better? There's a lot of people here are newbies, I hear, and some of us have invested. So I'd just like to hear your story. One good one, one bad one.
Yeah, I think I can take that one. Plenty of mistakes. It's okay to make mistakes. That's the first thing. It's okay. The second thing is, I think that don't hesitate to ask, even if it's the simplest question. Because again, you don't want to reinvent the wheel. You don't want to soak up your energy on something that's already out there. And there's so much knowledge and information out there that that you could already learn from. So even if it's a very silly question or the smallest question, read. There's so much information, right? And the other thing I would say is that just do not hide. There's nothing to hide. Because one thing that could kill your creativity is that baggage. Because it's such a high stress environment because you're running so fast. It's high speed, high stress. So the last thing you want is anything to hide. So just be very open with your entrepreneurs, partners, whoever it is. Just be very open so that you don't have to carry that kind of a baggage with you.
I would say one of the kind of things that I wish I had done more of is, and it's very true. It's, I think, something that Angela mentioned early on is don't be afraid to pivot. It's very hard to give up on a specific execution or your, this idea that you've had of exactly how this product should work. But if it really isn't resonating with customers or consumers, and yet and it's still a gut feel because maybe it just needs this or it needs this tweak, but don't spend too long kind of running against or banging your head against a brick wall when it's just not taking off. Like, be intellectually honest with yourself and say like, this really isn't working. I need to try something different. And I think that's a very important thing for entrepreneurs, to not just get so attached to an idea or the way that it's executed that you kind of forget the big picture of it. And then I guess one thing that I think I pride myself on doing well is cultivating and hiring the right team. And that again kind of goes back down to, does this person pass the talent/family bar? Do I want to spend, 14 hours a day with them? And to have that same rigor with every single hire, because you might get desperate. You're like, I really need a tech developer. I don't care if this guy can't speak. So you start to make sacrifices because you're desperate for resources. So just to kind of maintain that bar of who you actually work with, because it really does end up biting you if you don't maintain that bar.
So for me, 3 things: talent, focus, and relaxation. So the first in talent, sort of speaking to Wendy's point, we did make some mistakes initially in hiring because we were sprinting, and we did not have time to wait a month for a developer or somebody in marketing or sales. And so we did make compromises on the talent that we hired. And for us, one of our learnings is not only talent, but trust, and really understanding. The last thing you want to worry about is, hey, is that guy doing his job? Is he, because you're not in a position where you can micromanage. You have 1,000,001 things to do yourself. And if you have to micromanage someone, they're not a good fit for a startup company. So really trusting in their ability to perform their jobs so that you can let go. You don't have to be a crazy manager who owns everything. You can give entire parts of the company to people and trust that they are going to be more creative than you and out execute you, because you, again, have 1,000,000 other things that you're focusing on. So hiring, I think, just be very careful in who you let in, because it is your family. One of the other mistakes we made in hiring talent was, it's really hard to gauge somebody in a couple meetings. Like, how do you know that this person is a good fit for you to work 12 hours with for the next 4 years? It's hard to know. And so we would hire oftentimes based on personality. Like, the guy's great and he has great references and he's done a lot in his career, but, sometimes it's not enough, right? And for me, it was really understanding they might not be my best friend. I might not want to bring them home on Thanksgiving to meet my entire family, but they are great at their job. They mesh well with the company. And so, there's lots of subtleties in hiring, and we're certainly not experts yet, but we've learned a lot. The other thing was focus, really focusing on products. So when you read TechCrunch, when you read about your competitors, there is this nervousness that comes over you as an entrepreneur because, you knew that was in your pipeline, but oh my gosh, your competitor just came out with it. So maybe you should bump it up, right? And I think just really focusing on what your company needs, because that's what you understand best. You don't know your competitors as well as they know themselves, right? And so really being able to focus in on what it is your product needs to do for the market. And the last thing is, I wish I had taken more time, just more time for myself, whether it's a vacation for 2 days on the weekend, or, it's going to the spa, or it's just getting together with friends and relaxing. I really think that can help with the creative process, which as a founder, you need to stay creative, you need to stay innovative, and that's how you're going to solve any problem that comes in your company. So, I would suggest, if you're feeling like you're exhausted all the time, take some time for yourself, because it can help in so many other ways.
Or meditate every day. Yes. That really works. It works wonders, actually. I have to confess about one more thing. It was very difficult for me to fire people. It was so difficult that it was energy suck at some time. So what I did was, to compensate for that, I just made the severance package a little nicer. So I could fire easily. But if there's an employee that is not working out, even if he's a really good talent, but is not a good team player, I think it's time for them to go, and it's okay. And you could always, take care of them.
I have 2 things. It's also around hiring. and the second is around having an open ethos. So echo everything that was said about hiring. The one thing that I think I've learned over time is that I think interviews are useless, and the way that I hire everybody is I give them depending on the type of role, whether it's like a 3-hour project that we can test together, or maybe it's a 3-month project, right? So I think I just don't trust my own ability to interview. What I do is I test them out and they test me out, and do we like working together? So that's the first thing that I've learned from hiring. Regarding an open ethos, I think I definitely started, the first part very, very closed and very protective of like my ideas and my content. And what I've learned is like the more open I've been sharing my ideas, if I have an amazing hire, like an intern, like I share that with somebody else, or like a tip, I just think it's so much better. And I think there's this fear of like, you're giving away the piece of the pie, but like grow the pie, you will all help. Like we put other angel investing group events on our website, right? Like there's no, like we're not competitors. I actually try to think of nobody as a competitor, and I would just really, it's been very helpful for me, so having the open ethos. I actually think that advice from the panel is a great way for us to end the kind of formal Q&A. There is food in the back. We're obviously going to be around if you guys want to ask individual questions, but I think we're going to wrap the formal part of it for now. Thank you guys very much. Thank you so much to our panelists.
Oh, yeah, we have food, of course. Everyone needs food, but there's no liquor, so you have to get drunk on your own company or something like that. And we still have time. Thank you, everyone, for being with us today. And I want to thank Google there, Linda, for sponsoring us here. So this was sponsored by the Google Asian Network. And so we're really appreciative. So the Asian Network here is more active, and they're including people like us here. And, of course, we want you all to learn with us, because I learned a lot today, too. Right? A lot. So thank you.